All right, hello and welcome back. Now, day number 18, reading through 1st and 2nd Kings. Today's reading, chapters 13 and 14. Last time we met the priest Jehoiada and the king Jehoash, and we were reminded there was some good people there. Although with Joash the king, it was the continuous echo, did some good things, but not good enough. And Jehoiada helped remind us of the temple, the priesthood. And, we left off with the reflective question, now that we have a reminder in our narrative of the temple, is that any room for optimism? Well, as we go into today's reading, you'll notice in the email that I'm sending a chart of the kings of the northern and southern kingdom after the divide following Solomon's demise. This is something that I should have done before now, but there's so many names that we're working through, and it's we move quickly through these kings. Furthermore, sometimes the way our narrator writes is he'll skip ahead, then go backtrack over a king, and it's not all exactly in chronological order. And so maybe this chart will help you. But really what we're trying to do is get a feel for what is happening here, the music behind the words of the details, rather than these factual details within themselves, such as the names of the kings and who reigned when and where and in what sequence. My grandmother was a very avid Bible reader, and she would remember the names and the order of the kings very, very well. However, for us, I think that it's more important to get the feel of what's going on behind these kings. So we see today Joash, who is going to reign. He's going to be an evil king. God is going to be angry with him. And because of Joash's irresponsibility, Syria is going to be able to come and seize the land and maintain some control over the people. Meanwhile, there is going to be King Jehoahaz, who's going to end up reigning. He is going to be evil as well. He is not going to repudiate the sins of his fathers. However, what he did do is he did ask for God's mercy, and God saw that his people were oppressed in Syria and delivered them. So even though Jehoahaz was a bad king, an evil king, he did one thing right, which was to appeal to God for mercy. However, the refrain is that these kings are what they're failing to do is to repudiate the sins of their fathers. They're unwilling to backtrack, as it were, and what it might require is to destroy the legacy of their fathers, even for them to repudiate their father's sins. And so here you've got this complexity in this kind of society, to where nobody is independent. There's no sense of individuality. You are what in a collectivistic community, you're what the community says you are. You come from a line of people. You come from a line of fathers in this case. And so for you to repudiate the sins of your father means almost a denial of your own genealogy, which is something that there's no concept of individuality, that you're going to be your own man, aside from your fathers. And so it was a very hard thing for any of these kings to do. It's why even the best ones were only able to go so far. However, though, it was something that was necessary for them to do. And in fact, we're going to see further echoes in this chapter. Not only is it Jehoahaz, but it's also Jehoash, who is going to be one who is going to do bad things and not undo the sins of the fathers before him. Okay, so there's Elisha once again mentioned. However, he has a terminal illness. He's going to die. Interestingly, they put it in here as kind of a side note. Later, after he's buried in his tomb, they throw another corpse in his tomb, and the power of Elisha, even in death, is so strong that it's able to resurrect this dead man. So that's kind of interesting. So what's going to happen now that Elisha is gone? You know, there's been these sporadic representatives of God. But the people really aren't changing. And of course, once we go into chapter number 14, here is Amaziah, who reigns over Judah. He's another one that God approves of him. Verse 3, he does what the Lord approves, but not like David did. David, for all of his faults, as we have seen the sequence of Kings, David doesn't look so bad anymore. And it wasn't that David was flawless, but David knew how to return, as it were. These fellas, they can do some good things compared to some of their counterparts, and once again, we see here in verse 4, in the case of Amaziah, the high places were not eliminated. The people were continuing to sacrifice and burn incense on these high places, these altars that had become a surrogate for Baal worship, for pagan worship, and almost a substitute for temple worship. However, I forgot to mention at the close, late in chapter number 13, it mentions that that God is feeling mercy for his people. We're seeing these bad kings, but he's feeling merciful. However, we're not quite sure what all the implications of that mercy is at this point. What's the best thing for these people? Only God knows, right? However, if God is giving them mercy now, what's going to happen when mercy expires? Perhaps that's the next reflective question going forward. So in chapter 14, they end up in civil war once again. They're fighting. They never cease from fighting. And it's so bad that even in the civil war, the gold and silver that were in the temple are being taken away, along with hostages and places from tangible goods from the palace. So there's something, there's serious here, but it's also, I think, representative. The temple that they had just invested in, now the stuff has been looted. This is not good. There's no stability in the temple. This is very figurative. The people are seeking out the high places to worship, the pagans, rather than taking their temple in Jerusalem seriously. But in all of this, at the conclusion here of chapter 14, it's going to say here in some of the final verses that God remembers them. In verse 26, God sees their intense suffering and sees that they had no deliverer, that God knew that He wasn't going to blot out Israel's memory from under heaven, and so God's not done with them. But what does this mean? So I suppose I believe we have 6 readings left now after today. The questions are, is how is God going to remember them? What's going to happen when mercy expires? And we'll see again tomorrow.